글로벌 코리아 박람회에 오신
Welcome you all to Global Korea Convention 2020. In this session, you are going to talk about the international ODA and gender issues, more specifically the 10-year progress and future outlook for gender equality ODA by Korea. I'm the moderator for this session, Shin Hae-soo from Korea Center for UN Human Rights Policy. Thank you all very much for being here with us, both on-site and online. Now I'd like to open the session. First of all, I'd like to invite President Yoo Kyung-moon of Korea Women's Development Institute for the opening remarks. Please welcome her with a warm round of applause.
안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon. I am President Yoo Kyung-moon of Korea Women's Development Institute. Thank you all very much for participating in this session despite your busy schedule. In the post-COVID-19 era, we are here together to talk about how to mobilize Korea's leadership capability, and that is why we're here together at this Global Korea Convention 2020. And I'd like to thank our co-hosts, KDI, and other organizing bodies for their effort. And also, I'd like to thank Minister Jong-ok Lee from the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family for her warm congratulatory remarks that we are going to listen to shortly. We put together this session to look back on Korea's 10-year history of ODA in the area of gender equality and look forward to the future. The gender equality is one of the basic philosophies of Korea's ODA under the relevant law, and we still see the need to emphasize gender equality around the world. So as a result, for the past 10 years, gender equality related ODA grew both in volume and in quality as well in Korea. Women's role in society has been growing around the world. And in tandem with that change, we are also stepping up our effort. We are also reaching out to women in the regions of conflict. Gender equality ODA, despite its significance, still takes up a small portion in the overall ODA. About 10% in the case of Germany. Compared to Germany and Sweden, Korea's the gender equality ODA share in the overall Korean ODA is very low, hovering around 10%. The COVID-19 situation actually accentuated gender inequality in Korea. And in other countries as well. So we need to be more vigilant in this area. And I hope this session will be a great forum to talk about ideas to promote gender equality and awareness about gender issues. I thank all the presenters and discussants and participants. Thank you very much.
네, 원장님.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for your opening speech. Now, I would like to invite you to listen to the video message by Minister for Gender Equality and Family. Good afternoon. I am Lee Jong-uk, Minister for Gender Equality and Family. I would like to thank the organizers for putting together a session dedicated to the topic of international development cooperation in gender equality. I'm grateful to the Korean Women's Development Institute for organizing this session, and I would also like to thank KOICA, Sookmyung Women's University, and KCOC for participating in this session. And I would also like to thank the presenters, Dr. Chang Eun-ha, Director of the Center for International Development Cooperation of KWDI, Ms. Stephanie Kim, Gender Specialist at KOICA, and the moderator, Dr. Shin Hae-soo, President of Korea Center for UN Human Rights Policy. International development cooperation has focused on the common goal of narrowing the gap between the North and the South. Since 2015, sustainable development has become the core paradigm with 17 concrete goals, which we hope to achieve by 2030. Eliminating inequality between countries and achieving gender equality are important sustainable development agenda. Korea has relatively short history as a donor in development cooperation. In 2010, we became a member of DAC and became one of the donors in OECD. So we celebrate this year our 10th anniversary as a member of DAC, firmly establishing ourselves as a significant donor, and we're proud of the fact that we've made meaningful progress in gender-conscious ODA. Although our experience as a donor may be relatively short, we have our extensive experience as a partner country. Therefore, Korean ODA efforts are marked by a deep understanding of the partner country perspective. My ministry is engaged in various bilateral ODA projects, including women's vocational competency development training, women's capacity building support, prevention of violence against women, and survivor support. We also make financial contributions to UN Women with a focus on gender-sensitive peace building and gender-sensitive recovery from COVID-19. Ministry of Gender Equality and Family also endeavors to do gender mainstreaming in ODA projects run by various government ministries and to expand ODA with a gender focus. From the identification of potential ODA opportunities to the planning, implementation, and evaluation of outcomes, we seek to introduce gender perspective, and we've been developing a gender equality promotion toolkit to this end. COVID-19 has made it challenging to carry out ODA projects. However, crises can also be turned into opportunities. At a time when gender equality is even more critical, Korea can contribute by reviewing our public diplomacy and ODA from a gender perspective and come up with ways to further strengthen our ODA in the area of gender equality. In closing, I wish you a successful conference, and I wish all the participants health and safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So even though Minister Lee could not be here with us physically, but still she graciously sent us a video message. So thank you very much, Minister Lee. Now we are going to start the session. I'd like to invite our moderator, President Hae Soo-shin from the Korea Center for UN Human Rights Policy. She is now also a member of the UN Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Committee. Hello, nice to meet you all, and thank you very much for inviting me as a moderator at this session. I want to thank the organizers, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, and Korea Women's Development Institute for organizing this session. As introduced, I've been working in the area of human rights and also economic and social and cultural rights as well. If you look at the social contract area, women's participation in economic activities and cultural and social spheres are emphasized as well. So that has been my main area of activities. So thank you very much once again for inviting me to this significant session. Nowadays, gender equality ODA is gaining significance, and I think it's a very timely session to have an opportunity to talk about its progress so far, its status, and future outlook. We are going to listen to two presentations. The first presenter is Dr. Eun-ha Jang. She is now working at Korea Women's Development Institute. She's also Dr. Jang, and followed by Specialist Sun-young Kim from KOICA. Specialist Kim is a gender specialist at KOICA, so she is working hard to mainstream gender issues in ODA area. So KOICA's gender equality policy, how it is actually implemented worldwide, that is going to be Specialist Kim's topic. And now I want to introduce our discussants. Mr. Hun-sang Lee, he is the representative of International Healthcare Development Partners. He's also teaching at Yonsei University. And second discussant, Professor Min-jung Park from Sungmyeong Women's University. She is teaching at the Department of Global Services. And third discussant, Ms. Kyung-ju Lee. She is a manager from the in the area of humanitarian development at International Development Cooperation private consulting body. So we have two presenters and three discussants. Please keep your remarks at about 12 minutes. So now let me invite Dr. Jang for the first presentation. She's going to talk about Korea ODA policies, progress and outcome to develop women's capacity in developing countries. Hello, as introduced, I'm Eun-ha Jang. I want to look back on the outcome of Korea's gender equality ODA for the past 10 years. So I'd like to offer a brief overview throughout the history. And I also want to touch upon progress in Korea in terms of gender equality and what kind of future trajectory we can envision from the history. So my presentation is not highly technical or academic. Rather, my presentation is a quick overview of what we've been doing so far. And I'd like to offer my presentation as a starting point for our discussion. So these are main parts of my presentation. Part 1, the gender equality ODA status globally and in Korea. So I'm going to refer to some OECD data here. And part 2, Korea now has been a member of DAC, Development Assistance Committee, for 10 years now. So we joined the committee 10 years ago, and for the past 10 years, I want to take a look at how gender equality ODA in Korea expanded. Part 3 is about my suggestions. Well, I don't dare to make suggestions or proposals, but rather this is some ideas, point that I proposed for us to discuss about further development of Korea's gender equality ODA. First, global status of gender equality ODA. If you look at the OECD DOC member countries' total volume for gender equality ODA, annual average, it was $48.7 billion, taking up 42% of total ODA. So it was a record amount. Compared to this amount in the previous period between 2009 through 2010, the volume was $25.3 billion. So there was a significant increase in the amount. And out of the total ODA, 4%, which is about $4.6 billion, had gender marker 2 as a major principal objective. So in the case of gender marker 1, it means that gender equality ODA may not be the most core project objective, still one of important objectives of that ODA. Gender marker 2, it means that gender equality ODA is the most main objective and goal of that ODA program. Gender marker 0 is that this program has not been confirmed for any gender equality ODA element. On the right-hand side, you have a bar graph of DOC member countries' portion in gender equality ODA. In certain countries, gender equality ODA take up as much as 80 or 90%. For example, Northern European countries. Gender marker 2, that's actually purple color. So you can see that certain countries have a high portion of gender marker 2. Spain, Australia, and Austria. So they focus on gender marker 2 program. This year marks 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Action Plan. So I wanted to look at the gender equality ODA proportion since the Beijing Declaration. You have the chart on the right-hand side. So media, human rights, education, training, these areas received more ODA, but that is not the case for gender issues and gender equality. But what we can also read from this data is that there are certain types of ODA that's receiving increasing amount, for example, armed conflict and violence against women. So this is a current trend. And let me move on to the status of Korea's gender equality ODA. So if you look at the overall average ratio of gender equality ODA in Korea from 2017 to 2018, it takes up about 80% of the total Korea's ODA. And gender marker 2 takes up about 2.2%, gender marker 1 takes up about 15%. So as you can see here, we have been steadily increasing gender equality ODA program, but still compared to the OECD average of 42%, we have a long way to go. If you look at the spider web kind of graph on the right top of the chart, education and reproductive health received a lot of ODA. It's almost skewed. And next, gender marker 1 program. So if, let's say, out of the 100% of gender marker 1 programs, over 80% of Gender Marker 1 programs are done by the Korean Export and Import Bank. And Gender Marker 2 program, so out of the total 100% of Gender Marker 2 programs, 83% are implemented by KOICA. But gender markers alone does not actually give us a comprehensive view of Korea's gender equality ODA status. So, because sometimes the programs are not properly identified as gender marker 1 or 2. So, for example, gender marker 0, whereas the given program actually has some gender equality element. So this is something that we need to monitor going forward. And again, gender equality ODA status in Korea. For Korea to join OECD DOC, we received a peer review, a special peer review back in 2008. And except for that initial peer review in 2008, we also received additional 2 peer reviews so far. So initially, back in 2008, that's before Korea became a DOC member country. So the peer review finding said that Korea emphasizes gender equality as one of the issues of cross-cutting issues, but still not enough gender equality ODA volume. So after that, we've been steadily increasing gender equality ODA. Now I want to talk about how gender equality ODA has been expanded in Korea now that we commemorate the 10th anniversary of becoming a DOC member. So gender equality ODA increased in volume. That's clear. We can just refer to the numbers here. So Gender Marker 1 program, Gender Marker 2 programs, they both grew quantitatively. And now in many of the programs, gender equality is a mainstream element. So if you look at the table on the right-hand side, in 2009, out of the total ODA budget, only 3% was allocated to gender equality ODA program, whereas the 2018 number is 18%. And also providing ODA to women's group. In that case, we collect the data under CRS indicator. So it's a separate indicator. And also domestic violence. Violence against women. So ODA for to fight against domestic violence, violence against women. These ODA are measured as a separate indicator. So this is a timeline since Korea joining DOC and how Korea's gender equality ODA has been developing so far. So then what kind of elements or policies are common or frequently found in Korea's gender equality ODA programs? So first of all, in 2010, we enacted the Basic Act on International Development Cooperation. So here, Article 3 clearly mentions realization of gender equality. And steadily after that, Korean government also included realizing gender equality in the basic plan for Korea's ODA. And also, gender sensitivity became an important measure to evaluate ODA programs in Korea. And also for that, and after that, specific guideline to mainstream gender equality was introduced as well. And here very clearly, support for women, refugees and children and other vulnerable people are included. So that's in 2019. And now a second basic basic plan is drafted. And here again, support to women, children, and refugees and other vulnerable people are included. So girls and support for girls is also important as well. Well, that was back in 2017. And in 2018, really important initiative was undertaken by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is a peace initiative with the women. And with this initiative, we conducted ODA programs. That was in 2018. In 2019, again, we revised a humanitarian support strategy specifying the priority support for women, children, refugees, and other vulnerable people. So that has been a quick historical overview. So gender equality ODA grew both in size and scope in Korea. And for effective implementation of gender equality ODA, we offer a lot of education opportunities. We publish guidelines as well. And so thanks to that, nobody now asks why we need to have gender equality ODA. Now the question is, how can we expand gender equality ODA? So from now on, this is my kind of personal take on this issue, my own questions and comments and ideas about gender equality ODA. So once again, we need to increase and improve gender equality ODA. And we've made a lot of efforts to that end. But how much progress have we really made qualitatively? So we need to take a hard look at our improvement so far. So I'm sure everyone will agree on the need of gender equality aid. But many people kind of struggle with how part of the equation. So this is something that we need to address going forward. So these are some of my ideas that I'd like to suggest for further development of gender equality ODA. Once again, please take these ideas just as conversation starters. When I was preparing this presentation, I thought about what does gender equality ODA mean for Korea? And what is the way forward for us? Have we ever had a really serious thinking and deep discourse about this? So there are many Korean experts on gender equality, and even among experts, they don't have a uniform understanding of gender equality. And so they don't know what gender equality mean. They don't know what gender equality ODA mean because everyone understands it differently. So I felt the need to have a widely agreed upon definition of gender equality and gender equality ODA. And also, we need to identify priority areas for gender equality ODA, set the right target, and manage the budget and coordinate programs so that we can avoid overlapping programs. In terms of the institutional framework, we still need to strengthen certain policies. Are we going to simply focus on women and children? It's very easy to include the phrase, we focus on women and children in any policy document. But that is not enough. And also, gender ODA. We really don't have a gender ODA specialized research center. And personally, it is my personal desire to see such a center. So such a center would be able to manage data more specifically about gender ODA. So a kind of think tank. And also, gender equality ODA implementation education is necessary, I believe. When I go out to educate people about gender equality ODA, gender equality comes across as a very vague concept to many people. So even such ODA program participants, they don't understand what gender equality means. But usually, so I hope that we can kind of identify gender equality ideas to improve gender equality, and ideas for gender equality ODA from bottom up. And fourth, I think this is really a fundamental issue. So we implement gender equality ODA, and people think of it as a vague concept. I think that's because we are living in a very gender unequal society. So even in our society, gender inequality is very severe. So we don't know what gender equality is in a real sense. We never learned about gender equality from our fathers, so we don't know what gender equality looks like and feels like. So, when the gender equality ODA practitioners and the implementation institutions, when they themselves do not have enough understanding of this, then how can such programs benefit a lot of people? So I think fundamentally this is something we need to think about as well. So this has been my short presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Chang. So Dr. Chang gave us an overview about the 10-year history of Korea's gender equality ODA. So how its status has changed over time in comparison to other countries' gender equality ODA. And also, although Korea's gender equality ODA grew a lot in volume and in scope, but still there's much more room for improvement. And she gave us some ideas for us to mull over. So I hope to hear great feedback about those ideas from our discussant later on. So we need a socially agreed upon understanding of gender equality ODA. Education is important. How are we going to educate people about gender equality ODA? And also the practicing institutions themselves, they also need to have understanding of gender equality. So thank you very much for your presentation.
이런 과제를
So we've looked at the challenges. And now I would like to invite a speaker from KOICA, which is actually carrying out the ODA projects facing all these challenges. And so I would like to hear from Dr. Stephanie Kim, who is the gender specialist at KOICA. She's going to talk about SDG 5 and the kind of gender equality ODA best practices that KOICA was able to implement. So please, Dr. Kim. Good afternoon. I am Stephanie Kim, and I'm a gender specialist at KOICA. And the previous presentation was, something that I could really concur with, and I do believe that if we can overcome those challenges, we could truly say we are doing gender equal ODA. I was initially going to provide the best practices from the beginning of the presentation, but I think depending on the perspective, one might see it as a best practice, others might not. And so I wanted to provide some background in the beginning of the presentation. And I have experienced projects where gender equality was not adequately respected. And through interventions, we've been able to improve upon our performance. So I would like to first begin with KOICA's strategy for gender equality. And then I'll talk about our KOICA project examples. And we also have some KOICA initiative project examples. We have at KOICA projects that actually implement the initiatives that are put forth by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. So I have on the left side the core elements that constitute our gender equality strategy. So from 2008 to 2016, we were able to achieve significant progress in terms of gender equality. And we have been focusing on health, education, and also we have sought to in delivering these health-focused and education-focused projects, we have sought to help girls and women, and also Better Life for Girls initiative was something that we contributed to. As we became a member of OECD DAC, we were required to have a gender specialist. They asked, do you have a gender sensitivity officer? And the director of KOICA at the time ran directly to KWDI to get adequate training in order to meet the requirements proposed by OECD DAC. As you know, in order for there to be a perception or perspective, you need to have certain rules and systems or institutions in place that would nurture that culture or perspective. And so the people who are in KOICA have been learning about gender mainstreaming and gender equality and gender sensitivity. And we have ODA Academy, where we've been raising awareness with the general public. And as you know, the SDGs have been defined, and KOICA decided to maybe broaden our perspectives because we tended to be very focused on particular areas. And we found that no matter how hard we work on our projects, unless there are fundamental changes in mindset, it would be very difficult to have lasting effect. So we wanted to sort of change the mindset about the women that we are shaping, we were trying to help, because we wanted to see them not just as victims or just as survivors. We wanted to really nurture them to become competent agents in our society. And so we are required to provide grants. And within the grants, we only had a significant amount allocated to gender equality ODA. And we wanted to really make our projects meaningful so that there can be some mindset change. But we felt our resources and our competencies were limited. So we decided to work with other organizations. And you know, there are a lot of Korean CSOs that are also present in these developing countries. And they have observed the gender inequality in these local communities, and they've been working with UN and MDB. And so we also felt that it is very important for us to work multilaterally with different partners, with different perspectives, and with different experiences. So we have decided to take a transformative approach to take the disadvantaged women to really transform them into agents of change. And as Dr. Chang mentioned, if gender mainstreaming is not embedded within the organization, it is very difficult to have that organization be successful in gender equality, in doing gender equality ODA. So we've been making a lot of efforts to really gender mainstream our own organization. We have set our gender equality strategy, and this is actually stated in our website. And in order to achieve outcomes, we really need to have our gender-sensitive perspective internalized. And also, instead of just going into a bilateral project without fully being capable, we decided to engage in multilateral partnerships. That is the key part of our strategy. Now, SDG 5, we've been involved in reproductive health, in education sector. And there are areas where we were not able to really effectively work. So we started a different
그래서 우리가
partnership. We have been able to work with UNFPA and UN Women. And we've been involved in the Fill the Gap, which is a KOICA SDG 5 initiative. And so we want these women who were marginalized and underserved to become true agents of change. And we started to identify, project ideas to nurture these women. And oftentimes, the projects that we had been involved in were not adequately documented, and the data did not get stored very effectively. And we really have to talk with data in order to persuade people. So, we decided to speak with the statistics offices in the respective countries in order for these data to be collected and to have these data for effective implementation in the future as well. And we have tried to work towards a very neutral and objective evaluation of our organization. And we were able to get recognition for being a very gender equal organization, both in our organization and in our endeavors abroad. Now, I would like to talk about our projects. I was involved in the Senegal drinking water project. In the TV, you see commercial where these women or girls would go for drinking water, and everyone knows that there is an issue. But when we were trying to engage with the community to actually do a project dealing with drinking water safety, there was a lot of challenges that we faced. We went and, it was a very remote location. And we were nevertheless able to create some infrastructure to make the drinking water safer in that area because we are backed by the Korean government. But at the time, we were not able to fully analyze how this project could have positive impact on gender equality. So we went back to the project to understand the impact. I was a researcher at KOICA, so I went there and I found out that the increased leisure time for women and girls did not necessarily translate into greater opportunity for education or increase in income for these girls and women. And so there needs to be a mindset change. And we call the WASH project. So the hygiene aspect was added into this. And we continuously need to emphasize how women positively contribute to the community and what value they bring into the community. And without that, it's very difficult to achieve a mindset change. So does this mean that our project was a failure? Actually, KOICA's drinking water project was able to achieve the goal of providing safe drinking water and thereby raising the quality of life. So we were able to achieve that, no problem. But from a gender equality perspective, there was still a lasting gender inequality that remained in the local community, which we were not able to change. And in terms of achieving sustainable development, this was a success because they were able to sustainably produce drinking water and access drinking water. But gender equality-wise, there was a lasting problem. And in this area, the tribe had a custom of female genital mutilation, and they tend to keep girls away from schools and marry them off at a very young age. So there were a lot of problems in terms of gender. So although this was a successful case of providing safe water, we needed also to make this project more gender equal. So we went there once again. But in this project, we found that the salinity level, and the second time around when we went, the salinity level had gone up. And so we realized that we needed to deal with the salinity issue. And as we did that, we wanted also to incorporate gender equality promotion aspects. So we created a plan to introduce gender mainstreaming into the second phase of this safe drinking water project. We were able to meet with a women's association in this village, and these women often want to play an important role as a mother to their children, and they're very interested in education. And despite the COVID-19 pandemic, some of our colleagues did go to Senegal to actually understand how gender mainstreaming is being done with this project. And so over a course of 10 years, this drinking water project has continued. Initially, this project did not really have gender equality consideration. But as participants in the project woke up to the need for gender mainstreaming, we've been able to tweak the projects, and we hope to present in the future better gender equality outcomes through this project. And also, we've been involved in other projects. And this was done not just by us, but we were working with other organizations as well. And the aim of this project was to create a social enterprise to promote self-sufficiency. And there were women as well as men who got involved. And this is a workshop where there are a lot of sewing machines, and they create dresses. And they actually held a fashion show afterwards. And from 2018 to 2020, $1.3 million was invested. So this was not such a large project for COICA standards, but we were able to touch upon these different SDGs, 1, 8, 10, 11, and 12, and we created a matrix to evaluate, but this particular group here were made up of forced migrants in the Philippines, and they were very unhappy, very depressed, without hope. And so what they really wanted was to put up a fashion show to reaffirm that they're very confident and reliable people, and they wanted to show that international community that quantitative growth, although it could be meaningful, that in and of itself will not be the only meaningful outcome of these projects, so that they wanted to make a statement about that. And so they really wanted to show the world what they are capable of. And in that sense, this project was a success. And so it is very important to justify a project, maybe in terms of numbers, but if you also look at the individuals who are touched by the project, even if they're only few in number, that project can actually be very meaningful. And this is a project which kicked off just a couple of weeks ago because of the COVID-19. East Timor is a very conflict-ridden region. And this project is to prevent gender-based violence. And remember the gender markers? In addition to that, there was a different code. And violence against women and girls, there is a different code called CRS. So this project is really aligned with that CRS code. And we've been developing these projects that have this CRS code. You can see on the left, we no longer call the victims of violence victims. We often call them survivors. But we want them to evolve from being a victim to really stand up and become human rights defenders themselves. And in order to achieve that, we need a very comprehensive approach. On the right, you see 4 different UN agencies. First, you need UNFPA because we need direct connection to health care services. And also, there are legal efforts that need to be made, and this is done by UNDP. And also, perception and mindset is very important. So there is UN Women who have been very active in that area. And IOM, well, we did not know when we were planning this project that there would be this pandemic. Despite that, we included IOM because of potential for natural disasters such as floods in this area and displacement as a result. And so now IOM was provided indelible support in this project. If we were to just send 1 or 2 Korean people, that may not have a very big impact. So we wanted to partner with these different partner organizations, and we want to continue monitoring these projects so that we also learn from the experience and continue engaging with the local community. And we have planned these projects for 2021, economic empowerment of women, women's empowerment, and also we want to produce alternative sanitary napkins for refugees in Rohingya, and also we have a project for capacity building for peace judges. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. I have left 5 seconds. Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your presentation. In COICA, I know you developed the gender sensitive guideline, gender sensitivity guideline or gender mainstreaming guideline, and I got involved in that as well. And KOICA has been very active in this regard. And you provided very good real project experience from Senegal and East Timor, which was very interesting. I think Fill the Gap initiative is very good naming and branding. GAP standing for Gender Advocacy Partnerships. SDG 5 is summarized as gender equality, but this includes the empowerment of women and girls. So how to measure that empowerment is important, but sometimes it's not just important in terms of numbers, but the actual qualitative experience of transforming oneself from a victim to a more active agent for change. I think that is very valuable. So in that sense, your presentation was very insightful. Dr. Chang talked about the gender equality promotion in the international arena and also provided Korea's overall initiatives and so you provided the overall framework in terms of gender equality in ODA, and Stephanie Kim was able to provide the actual project experience. So I think that was very helpful.
남성 토론자
So I think it is a great relief for us to have a male voice with us. So actually other sessions are quite male dominated, but this session we were able to get hold of a male panelist. So it is our good fortune, and now I'd like to ask Mr. Lee to deliver his discussion point. So Professor Lee, please go ahead. So from the perspective of international healthcare and development, please go ahead. The Global Korea Convention 2020, I think out of all the sessions, I think this session is the best practice case in terms of mainstreaming gender issues. So it's my honor to be here today. And also, it's also kind of a reality in Korea that only this kind of topic can have a female-dominated session. While listening to the presentations, I worked at KOICA as a healthcare expert and as a researcher Chang and specialist Kim mentioned, we have a lot of issues and challenges at hand and how we are going to resolve them. But both presentations were very passionate. So I was able to feel the passion, which was quite encouraging for me. And now my comment is I want to start with the basis of gender equality ODA. First, I think it needs to be multifaceted. So many ODA programs clearly state that it provides support to women, children, and vulnerable groups. So we have many such initiatives. For example, Peace with the Women initiative. So these are all very welcome efforts. And I believe that these efforts will contribute to gender equality ODA. And KOICA is also proposing a more specific direction for gender equality ODA. So I'm seeing a lot of improvement, progress in gender equality ODA. But compared to the volume growth so far, as Director Zhang mentioned, we are still lacking in terms of quality. For example, what can be done better and how we can pursue gender equality more. So maybe we need a more specialized ODA programs with special focus on gender equality ODA. So I'm talking about a need to develop more specialized programs. So from now on, when we expand gender equality ODA, we cannot be focused on simply volume expansion. We need to think about the quality improvement as well, scope improvement as well. And also, we need to pursue mainstreaming gender across the ODA in Korea. So gender equality based implementation strategy is necessary. So for example, not just in the area of healthcare and education, but in areas such as economy, agriculture, and ICT. So within this sectoral strategy, gender equality needs to be really embedded as a part of sectoral strategy. And already, many programs are in place, for example, in healthcare and education. So, for example, let's say a given program which is about birth control, can we classify that as a gender equality ODA? Birth control, if birth control is going up in a certain region, is it simply because birth control tools are being distributed there, or is it because wives are actually being empowered vis-a-vis their husbands? So we need to have a program that can improve gender equality, not just quantitatively, but qualitatively as well. Something that can lead to real substantial improvement in gender equality. And gender-based projects, we should go beyond simply implementing gender-based program. I believe that ODA should be a core aspect of Korea's overall international cooperation. And out of the Korea ODA, gender equity should be an important topic as well. I believe in empowering women, and I believe in improving people's capability in dealing with the gender equity issues. So we need to develop more specialists in this area. Not that we don't have any specialists in this area, but we still need more. So we need to train more specialists, and we need to develop expertise and gender equality. And healthcare, agriculture, environment, in all these sectors, gender sensitivity need to be really embedded. So for anyone who's executing ODA program, they need to have gender sensitivity, and they need to practice gender sensitivity and gender equality in any given ODA program. So for that, maybe a more specific gender basis can be utilized, and we need to have a more international level of expertise and specialists who can execute ODA programs, gender equity ODA programs with more gender sensitivity. In the past, when we talked about gender equity ODA, it was mostly UN programs. But in the UNFPI and IOM and other international bodies are now active in this area. So we have more international bodies to work with. So what about situation in Korea? So we need to develop more domestic partners in Korea, for example, NGOs, civil groups. So we also need to empower domestic capacity to conduct and implement gender equity ODA. And in doing so, we also need to have more field-based ODA program. And also evaluating and researching ODA program needs to be more expanded. So I hope to see more bigger research base into this area. So the gender equity ODA can really be rooted on the field situation. And I want to see real academic talents researching this area. The academia who's doing research, and also the field workers, the field practitioners who actually go out and implement OEDA program. I think they need to work together. They need to talk together. So I think we need to build an ecosystem to facilitate such exchange. So I think that could be one way to improve our gender equality ODA strategy implementation. And in the process of making policies, we need all these elements. So we need to have kind of virtuous cycle where each element reinforce each other. And also, we need to be more specific in our program content. So we really need to have a quality gender equity ODA specialist. And we also need to have kind of career path options so that talent can be attracted to this field. So we need to have a really expert professionals, expertise, who can go out and work on the field overseas and work with international organizations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your points. I think those are all very great points. So not just in healthcare and education, each sector needs to mainstream gender, and also human resource development and international body and NGOs all need to work together. And the academia and the field workers, they need to work together. So there's actually KAIDA. KAIDA is playing that bridge role. And there is the International Development Cooperation Alliance. So we have kind of framework, but it's not very active yet. But yes, you pointed out really great point. So thank you very much.
그럼 두 번째.
Next, I would like to invite Dr. Min-jung Park to deliver her comments. Good afternoon. I'm visiting professor at Sookmyung Women's University. It is my great honor to participate in this session on gender equality and international development cooperation. I really enjoyed listening to the presentations and the discussion delivered by Mr. Hoon-sang Lee. And I would also like to add by providing some of my recommendations to addressing those challenges. As Mr. Hoon-sang Lee mentioned, Korea has built an institutional foundation and framework. I still feel a little bit pessimistic because I still would want to ask, isn't it true that we only have the institutional framework in place without real substance? Because, gender equality related act oftentimes do not have a clear definition as to what gender equality means in substance. And if you look at the COICA's guideline with regards to gender equality, And it also provides, gender marker-related explanations. So in terms of the numbers, we have some progress that has been validated by numbers, but there are more than 40, agencies that are engaged in ODA grants. But if there is only one agency which is involved in the ODA grants, actually promotes gender equality, if just one organization is doing that, what about the other ones? So I got involved in a research, and as of 2017, of all the Korean projects that were submitted to the ODA sector, we found titles that seem to denote some sort of consideration of gender equality, and yet, in substance, there was no gender mark assigned to these. And we looked at those projects. If we were to include all of those that lack gender mark, but in title mention something about gender equality, then we would be able to say 1% of the ODA has some gender equality aspect. So that means even including those that were, even if we generously include those that were not given gender mark as being involved in some sort of gender equality initiatives, it would still be only 1%. That means we still lack the ODA projects with the gender equality focus. So we now have an area where we need significant improvement. And actually, Korea has become more active in this area. And I believe that many international organizations are sending proposals to Korea to get involved. And if now this is an area where Korea can really make meaningful contributions, we should think hard about what substantial contributions we can actually make that can concretely make changes in the lives of the women in these local communities. So right now, we are involved in partnerships with various, multiple organizations, but it's not like we have a very distinct philosophy or our own distinct approach to gender equality in these projects. So I think we need to build and develop on this. So in order to achieve improvement on this front, I would like to point out that there is no gender specialist in some of the government ministries. So I hope that the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family could make some recommendations so that there is greater gender mainstreaming across the Korean government. And that's a point I would like to make. In the case of Japan, in 2005, they introduced the gender specialist system. So they hired many gender sensitivity officers, and they were able to create organizations where gender mainstreaming has really taken place. I think we need to make a lot more effort in this regard. I think this was a critical view that Dr. Park was proposing. So although you're saying that there is some sort of institutional framework in place for practicing gender mainstreaming, there seems to be a lack in substance, is what she was saying. So not just in Ministry of Foreign Affairs or Ministry of Gender Equality, we should really have gender sensitivity officer in all of the different government ministries so that we can really have a whole of the government approach when it comes to gender mainstreaming. Thank you very much for that comment. So who's going to put the bell on the cat's neck is the issue. So we have KWDI here, and we have COICA here, and we also have 2 scholars from the academia. So we've heard from these different sectors. So now I would like to finally hear from the civil society organization's perspective on this. So what must change? Can you tell us your view from KCOC?
Hello, I'm from KCOC. My name is Kyung-Ju Lee. I think I need to explain briefly about my organization so that people can understand why I'm here. We work in humanitarian effort and development aid as well. So we participate in ODA programs, COICA ODA programs, and it's a kind of a consultative body among NGOs. So because of that, we have a lot of resources and information from many NGOs. I want to make 2 main points, but then while listening to other discussants, already covered much of what I wanted to talk about. So I'd like to strike down some of the points that may be overlapping. So first, for the past 10 years, Korean NGOs have been working hard to promote gender equality. And specifically in the gender equality ODA, what kind of efforts did Korea NGOs make so far? And that's the first point I want to make. And second, what about humanitarian aid? So in the context of armed conflict or natural disasters, what kind of gender equality needs to be embedded in humanitarian assistance? There is a CSO, Ballroom, in Korea. It's development NGOs present in Korea. They kind of share their information about how many staff they have and in where they're working. So it's kind of a compendium of the data about these NGOs. And recent data is going to come up at the end of this year. So by looking at these data, I was able to identify certain interesting things. So when the first CSO book was published, gender equality was not mentioned. Only in 2009, reproductive health was mentioned for the first time. And later, gender equity first appeared in 2011. And gender and other programs still were on a relatively backseat compared to other healthcare issues, for example, reproductive health. So gender issue was a part of healthcare issue, particularly with relations to reproductive health. But later on, gender equity began to be classified as an independent program topic. But still under the gender equity gender program, still specifically the contents was about healthcare, reproductive health, So reproductive health actually took about 1% out of the overall ODA. That was back in 2011, around 2011. And after that, gender equity and support for gender equity promotion groups, this kind of support increased, but still one significance we can draw from this is that gender equity ODA still grew in volume and scope, not just in the government and in NGOs as well. So I wanted to take a look at how this came about. So I wanted to look at the background of the gender equity ODA. Gender and gender equality and all the other ODA topics, we talk about safeguarding. Safeguarding is important. In the process of planning and implementing ODA programs, all the program participants and practitioners, they need to have a certain level of gender sensitivity. So they need to receive certain training, but it really varies institution by institution. Certain NGOs, they have a lot of experiences and expertise in training NGO workers about gender issues, gender equality, but some NGOs do not. Here, COICA can play a role, in my view. So now PDM is a really commonly used. But before, in many years, even for COICA program, we just wrote in a narrative form. So when PDM was first introduced, we were very much uncomfortable about how to use it, how to write it. But now PDM is kind of a standard language. So in that sense, PDM played an important role. And gender equity and gender sensitivity and mainstreaming gender in ODA programs, these are actually very wide activities. So how are we going to expand these programs in the more broader sectors? I think we can adopt gender equality, gender as an official language. And also NGOs, when we think about NGOs, usually NGOs work at really grassroots levels. We work at villages. We work with the village people. We meet with girls. So these NGO workers need to have gender sensitivity. They need to have understanding of gender sensitivity guideline to ensure that the NGO organization itself needs to have understanding of gender equality and sensitivity. So when you go out and work as a member or representative of the organization, your gender sensitivity is a kind of a reflection of your organization's gender sensitivity. So given that, we need to also think about how to improve the gender sensitivity organization-wise. And within the next 2 or 3 years, I think that institutional NGOs, the safeguarding is going to be included. That is our immediate goal for the near term.
And next year and the year after, KCOC will be providing education and training in more specific terms. Now, secondly, I would like to talk about gender issues in the humanitarian aid situations. Gender-based violence has been talked a lot about recently, especially in the context of natural disasters and in conflict situations. We find women very vulnerable to gender-based violence in these situations. And the reason why I wanted to bring up gender-based violence in humanitarian aid situations is because, in the development situations, we talk about women as potential agents of change, but in the humanitarian aid, gender is directly linked to one's survival, one's life or death situations. So it's not a matter of not having the influence or the power or the initiative. It's not to that extent. It's actually more critical because women could just die in humanitarian situations. And so gender-based violence in the humanitarian context is very, very important. And I hope that, more organizations like COICA can lead this discussion and set great examples. With this, I would like to conclude my comments. Thank you very much. Until now, KCOC has been a great organization, getting together all the different CSOs and providing education and training for the CSO activists. And also some of the ODA funding has actually been executed through KCOC. So you have been a very important player in this sector. So you have talked about what challenges there are in the development cooperation context and the humanitarian aid context. One of the things that I found very insightful was this. In the health sector and also the reproductive health, I mean, terminology is something that we need to really agree upon. People use different terms because there are people who translate reproductive health into different terminologies in Korean. And so doctors and nurses use a different set of terms, and then there are another set of terms that are used by CSO activists. And so when I translate, it's very, very tough to choose the right term. So depending on the context, I try to choose the right one. But anyway, we really need to unify the terminologies, and we have to think about how we can promote greater gender sensitivity when we interact with the local community members that we're trying to serve. And also in the situations of natural disasters, gender-based violence can mean a life or death situation for women. So this needs to be given a special consideration is what I took away from Director Lee's comments. Now, the two presenters, do you have anything to add in response to the comments from the panelists? Well, I'm here on behalf of COICA, and I think your comments are for COICA. So I've jotted down many of your comments. And Mr. Lee, yes. The domain experts do need to be trained on gender sensitivity, and we believe that the ultimate goal is to have them have gender sensitivity, whichever domain they're working in. In Switzerland, there was a paper about the various ODA activities that are taking place, and it showed that oftentimes when anything relates to gender equality, they would dump the work all on one or two gender specialists. And I think it is very important for all of the different domain experts to have gender sensitivity and gender awareness. So we're working on that. And Professor Park's comments, I really agree with. And you really questioned whether this institutional framework has real substance and meaning. Well, our involvement in health and reproductive rights project, they became almost 90% of what we're doing, not because this was a gender project. These became an important part because these were part of health sector. And we really did not have any gender experts in the project. And so in order for these projects to really into the gender equality issues, such as why are women not able to have a say in family planning, for example, that needs to be expanded. And for us to really expand these reproductive rights related products or reproductive health projects into a more gender equality project, we really need to overhaul the whole thing. And also, I talked about the East Timor project. We have the Sunflower Center, and it's become a best practice that's been showcased. And many people want to have this similar center added to the various activities that we're doing. And we are doing a lot of things in order to engage as many different stakeholders as possible to promote gender equality. It's very difficult for just one or two gender specialists to take on all the responsibilities. And also, you talked about the definition of gender equality. We also did a survey on the definition of gender equality within our organization. And a series of activities engaging women to increase women's participation. So that was one of the definitions put forth in the survey. But anyway, yes, defining gender equality meaningfully is very important. And also, we have been doing human rights impact assessment. And PUSEA has been introduced, and we are doing safeguarding related surveys as well. And KOICA is leading in some instances. And as a sample, Save the Children already did this survey. And Save the Children, actually, they have a very streamlined policies on safeguarding, which we can learn from, and we need to really circulate this kind of knowledge.
Director Tang, do you have any comment? So while I was listening to the comments, I thought that, well, we can stay here for all night and keep discussing. But one realization came to me, so I'm really I feel the urgent need to say this. Gender equality ODA. So there are some issues specific to gender equality ODA, but there is the overall Korean ODA system issues. For example, the Korean ODA system is kind of fragmented. So when we talk about the challenges and obstacles in gender equity ODA, I want to see which is more specific to gender equity ODA and which is a kind of a spillover from the overall Korean ODA system issues. And the ODA, as you practice ODA programs 5 or 6 years, you feel the need to evaluate the programs, and you wonder what should be the right measure. And I had a chance to listen to a lecture. And for gender equity ODA, how can we measure that? How can we evaluate that? One discovery we made was that checklist, not checklist, but story collection. So story collection can be a way to measure gender equality ODA. So now I'm talking about qualitative evaluation and based on anecdote. So for example, an ODA recipient may come out and share her story. Because of this ODA program, I was able to get education, get a job, something like this. So maybe for gender equity ODA, we need to consider this particularity of the gender equity issues, and maybe we need to use more qualitative measure, even if it appears to be anecdotal, because that will give us a better picture of how this kind of ODA is making impact on the society. Yes, SDG goal number 5 and other 16 SDGs. So mainstreaming gender is just not limited to a particular SDG. It's supposed to be mainstreamed across the board, across SDG goals. For example, ICT, healthcare, reproductive health, so and agriculture as well. So each SDG area need to mainstream gender, need to incorporate gender as a main component. So that is a big task ahead of us. So how can we do that? How can we mainstream gender across SDGs? I think that is a big task ahead of us. So for Korea Women's Development Institute, I guess it's of particular concern for your institute. So maybe we can look forward to more specific research coming from you.
And Dr. Kim, I believe there are many challenges KOICA face as you implement these projects. So I think you really need to think about what KOICA needs in order to truly gender mainstream all the projects. And if you need external support in this, you have to identify what kind of support. I think that's something that you need to think about. And Professors Lee and Park, you also need to, do extensive research and also, educate your students with this perspective. And also, Director Lee from KCOC, I hope you can continue your work in the actual field of delivering ODA and providing assistance on the ground. So we have a research institute. We had, KOICA, which actually delivers ODA assistance, and we had professors from the academia, and we had the KCOC. So we had different stakeholders involved. So what happens with the outcome of our discussion today? Do we collate the recommendations and send it to the Office of the Policy Coordination? I think somehow we need to have this discussion fed back into meaningful change. Well, there was a lot of talk about health-related issues with regards to reproductive health. And when I first joined KOICA in 2011, so sexual and reproductive health was the topic that I talked a lot about. Perhaps maybe that's why KOICA focused so much in that line of project. But in Korea, we had significant achievements in this sector, so we wanted to share our results and try to share the good with other partner countries. That's why we were able to focus on this area. In the case of US, there was a lot of conservatism, and so there was not enough investment into providing family planning related assistance and dealing with reproductive health. And so that's why we sort of stepped in to fill in the gap. And we in Korea did not have a lot of health-related achievements that we could really transfer to other countries, but family planning was something that we had strength in. And so we got involved, and we got involved into mother and child health projects, and we were able to contribute our family planning expertise. But we have to think about whether the kind of family planning assistance that we've been providing really is in line with the gender equality initiatives that we're trying to promote. Because when family planning was first really led in Korea, the aim was to control the population that was growing so rapidly. And so if we think about family planning nowadays, of course, that might have some aspect of population control that needs to be considered. But actually, the family planning in today's context is more about the giving choice to the woman, the right to decide for the women. And so I think we need to sort of reflect upon our approach. And another thing I'd like to add is that we often have this framework of saying, we were doing well in this area, so let's do ODA using our strength to, teach them what to do. But I think we need to learn back from our partner countries because, for example, in Rwanda, there are many politicians and leaders who are women, whereas in Korea, we don't have that much representation of women in leadership positions. So instead of just purely delivering our experience one way towards the beneficiary country, I think we really need to sort of bilaterally or interactively, learn from even from our partner countries.
해보면서 가장 매력적.
Yes, I think that's really what I feel, what I see from the first-hand experience. So I cannot really dictate our ODA recipients just to follow us because we learn from each other. Korea actually has gone through development of over decades, and back in Cairo, human rights was an important issue at the Cairo conference. So I think that's something we need to think about in the future. So thank you very much for your comment. So we took a look back on the 10 years history of Korea's gender equality ODA, and we try to think about a way forward, and institutionally and also in terms of the substance, in terms of the human resources, in terms of the actual implementation. So we had a really active discussion about all these aspects of gender equality ODA. So I'd like to thank our presenters and discussants. Thank you very much. With this, I'd like to conclude this session on international development cooperation and gender equality. Thank you very much for your participation.